Welcome to episode 29 of the Adventuring for Mere Mortals podcast. I'm Kyle, joined by co-host Trevor, and this month we give the rundown of our annual adventure trip with the adventure crew. It was close to the largest group that we've had to date, and this year's adventure was to Isle Royale. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be part of the recording due to conflicts, but Trevor's going to take it away.
Hey, everybody. It's nice to see you all again. It's been about, 3-4 weeks since we all went on our trip. For everyone listening, this episode is going to be about the trip I've been calling our adventure crew trip. So it's a group that kind of started with me and one of our friends, Alex, from episode 2. We started going on trips, and then over time, it's kind of expanded to more and more people. And I think this might have been our trip with the biggest amount of people. We had 10 on this trip, and we went to Isle Royale, and in late June this year, or mid to late June. And so we had 10 people on the trip. Tonight, we have 5 people that went on the trip with us. And we're going to start going around the room and kind of, I will say their name and let them do their little introduction. And yeah, I think we're ready to go. I'm going to start with Doug. How about you go first?
Yeah, my name's Doug. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I actually grew up going to high school with Trev, and I think this is the 5th trip I've taken with Trev that we'll consider one of Trev's trips, and I'm using air quotes there.
Oh, cool. How about your lovely wife, Brandy?
Hi, I'm Brandy, and this is my 4th trip that Trevor has planned, and I live in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Cool. And next we'll have Gaska.
Hi, this is my first trip with this clan. I've been caving with Kyle for about 15 years, give or take, and that's how I got merged into the group. I live in the Chicago burbs and go a lot of places.
Cool. And last but not least, Luis.
Hey, this is my second one of Trev's trips, but my first hiking excursion with him. So,
yeah. Luis went on Ragbri with us last year. But cool. So I guess now that we've all been introduced, I'll give like a little bit of a background about like what this trip actually was. And then we'll kind of get into a bunch of questions. It's going to be a very hiking-centric podcast and just like fun facts, interesting stuff about Isle Royale, because it's not a heavily visited national park in our national park system. But yeah, we'll get into that for sure. But yeah, so the idea for this trip actually came from someone that wasn't able to go on the trip. Our friend Alex, it was his idea. We were pitching ideas about where we should go this year on our trip. Yeah, I forgot to mention, this is a year. We try to do one trip a year. It doesn't always happen, but we shoot for one. And we're pitching ideas, and Alex pitched Isle Royale. And like, if you've listened to this for a while, you know I'm a big national park nerd, and it had been a national park that I hadn't been to and didn't really have any plans to go to in the near future. So I was all on board immediately. And then we did a little more discussion and it won out. And like a month before the trip, Alex's life and work got in the way and he wasn't able to come. So we spent a lot of the trip saying things like, yeah, Alex would really, really like this. So we're a little mean, but it's all right. He's been mean to us too.
Poured out a drink in his honor.
Yep, that's right. But yeah, back to like what the trip actually was. If you're not familiar with what Isle Royale is, it is an island in Lake Superior So it's about 3 to 4 hours north of the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. It's really close to the Canadian border, actually. It's technically a part of the state of Michigan, which I'm not sure why. It's kind of far from Michigan, but it's like, I think 50, 60 miles from the Minnesota border on the north side. But the island's about 90 miles long or so. So it's a pretty big island. I think it's the biggest island in Lake Superior, if I'm not mistaken. But the entire island is designated a national park. It had had some previous habitation, both from the native peoples, the Ojibwe, and then later on we had settlers, mostly for mining claims and things like that. A neat thing about it is in, I think, early 1900s, some moose came over, swam over to the island. So they recolonized the island with a moose population that had been wiped out by settlers in previous times. And then I think in the 80s or 90s, they introduced wolves to the island. So that it's been like the longest predator prey relationship type of study in the world. So that's a really interesting and unique thing that the island has. It is like 99% wilderness there. I mean, you have some trails that cut through, but it is a remote place. I think that was my biggest takeaway from the island. But yeah, the only ways to get to the island is you can take a float plane in or take the ferry, or I guess if you have your own private boat, you can also take your boat to the island. But it's kind of difficult to get to, and that's why a lot of people don't make it out to the island. But yeah, the hike we ended up doing, well, the initial plan was to do basically a hike from one end of the island to the other along the Greenstone Trail, excuse me, which is like 70 something miles. But due to some time constraints and the National Park Service not giving me the permit I wanted due to the mileage that would have been required each day, we ended up doing about 2/3 of the island. So instead of getting onto the island in Rock Harbor on the furthest east part of the island, we went to a place called McCargo Cove and then spent 3 nights and ended up at the Wendigo Visitor Center on the west side of the island. So it ended up being something like 30 or 40 miles. I can't remember that off the top of my head. I should know that. I'll put it in the show notes. I should write that down. But yeah, we had a good time. And yeah, so that's my little summary. Am I missing anything, guys?
No, I'll hop in here. So I actually have my Strava pulled up from our hike. So I
nice.
show
Thanks,
that,
Doug.
yeah, I even like the little offshoot trails that we did, we ended up hiking just shy of 35 miles from McCargo Cove over to Wendigo. 3 nights, 4 days, but not 4 full days because we started late in the evening of day one. And we were to Wendigo pretty early in the morning, the last day there.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you, Trev. You know, my wife and I have been to a number of national parks, especially over the last 5 years. And remote is definitely the word that comes to mind as I think about this. Just the real calling card to me would just be if you want to see a place where there has been very minimal human involvement. I think Isle Royale is that place, whether it be the trail or the services. It's just a really remote area. So that's what made it kind of unique. I won't call it as grand or epic, maybe as like hiking the Grand Canyon or Angel's Landing, or, we like the Olympic National Park a lot. But here, if you like the water, if you like the kayak, or if you just like the remoteness of it, I think this is the park for you.
Yeah, for sure. And when you say even the trails look remote, if you are envisioning like a well-trodden dirt path for the entire trail, that is not what you're going to get here. There's a limited amount of people that are allowed to come on the island every year. And even we were on the most popular trail that goes through the center of the island. And there was a lot of places where you just felt like you were in Jurassic Park because all the vegetation was coming up over the trail. And we were not quite bushwhacking, but you were having to move all this berry bushes and stuff out of your way a lot of the time.
I feel like when Brandy has been telling our friends the story of this trip, she starts there. And so, I'll let you take it from there. But I think that's the part that stood out to you the most.
Yeah, some of the trails, like you can barely even see where you're walking. Like you can't tell
Mhm.
where the trail is. And then the weeds would be up to like, well, I'm like 5'6", so they'd be up to my shoulders in weeds. And if it's wet and raining, then you're just getting covered in all that water from the weeds. It was pretty remote.
Yeah, that was another thing that is important to mention is weather there. So, like, it's fairly high up, like in at least in the US. So, we actually had, I would call it decent weather, but not great weather. Like, we didn't get completely rained out multiple days, but we did get rain. Did we get rain every day but the last day? Or I think we did.
I think just about, pretty much.
Yeah, so there we were a little bit soggy from time to time, but at least the sun came out and we were able to dry our stuff. If it had been raining for 3.5 days straight, it would have been rather miserable because we wouldn't have been able to dry anything. But along with, like we mentioned, all the vegetation coming over the trails after it rains, even if you manage to stay out of the rain before, then you're just what I call it going through the car wash because you're going to get soaking wet anyway from all of the vegetation. But it was a completely unique experience for me, at least, because I'll call my favorite kind of hiking is desert hiking because it's dry. Usually the trails are not overgrown. It's easy to make quote unquote easy to make a nice dirt path in the desert compared to a place where vegetation tries to overgrow the path every year during the growing season. But yeah. So Gasco, what were your kind of first impressions of Isle Royale?
I spent a lot of time up in the Northwoods. Like traditionally, I like to go to Boundary Waters twice a year.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of the Northwoods feel, a lot of the Northwoods type trail with the what I would like to refer to of bridges of death, where you've got a very nice, well installed bridge that has one plank that is just totally not attached to anything to get you over the swamp. I thought it was really cool to see the Northwoods from on top. I'm used to seeing them from water level,
Mhm.
and it was. It's kind of surprised how heavily wooded it was up on top of the ridge. As we got a couple of really nice vista views, but only a few of them. But the ones that were
Yeah.
there were spectacular because we're on an island in the middle of a giant lake,
Mhm.
and the island has its own lakes,
Yeah.
which was pretty dang cool.
I agree. Yeah, you definitely had to work for your views for sure. Like I think we eventually went over the highest point on the island, but weirdly enough, it was completely vegetated and you barely even noticed you went over the top. Whereas on the further towards the east side of the island, you actually got more of those nice vista views, which I wasn't expecting, which is a little different than what I have in my brain about you go higher up, you get more views generally. But apparently that is not the case on Isle Royale.
Mhm.
But Luis, and this is an important thing to say. This was Luis's first like overnight longer type of trail, right? Or trail hike, right, man?
Yeah, this was the first ever actual backpacking trip I've done. Um, After Ragbri last year, I definitely started exploring a lot more and doing a lot more outdoor activities. And after Ragbri in October, or a friend and I hit Badlands National Park. Uh, did a lot more like outside winter stuff and just random hiking out in the snow with Tim during the winter, crossing little frozen creeks and whatnot, wrapping my uh, feet and socks in grocery bags and duct tape so my boots could get wet but my feet would stay dry and warm. And then in the summer before Isle Royale, we did um, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky and New River Gorge in Virginia. But then heading up into the northern part of the U.S., just before we even stepped foot close to Isle Royale, just Grand Portage in general it felt like a really completely different world, and it was just like it was the first time I've seen like that kind of vegetation and like a legit forest like that.
No, that's good. I'm glad. I mean, that's kind of why we try to do these trips in a bunch of different places to kind of expose us. Like, I selfishly like to go all the different places that are interesting, but it's a good side effect of that is exposing all my friends to these cool new environments. But so overall, Luis, were we too much, or was this too much, or was it the right amount, or did I just like throw you out of the frying pan into the fire?
I love it.
I think it was definitely a mix of just the right amount and getting tossed around in a frying pan. If the National Parks Service would have let you do the original plan, someone would have had to helicopter me out of there probably. But
Okay, well, National Park Service was looking out for you then.
yeah, for sure. But I don't even remember like how hard that second day was, the 15-mile day. It was for me. It was really hard, but I don't even remember that because all I really remember is just like how epic and beautiful the trip felt just from the rocks at the first like beach we stopped at when we were looking at rocks and at the water and whatnot to the high point of Minnesota in general and the highest point on Isle Royale. It was just it was everything was so memorable.
Good. I'm glad you don't remember the bad parts.
Luis, Brandy and I have this conversation all the time because there's always a moment on a Trev trip. We're in the middle of a long hike or like at Ragbri on a long bike ride. We're like, why in the hell are we using our vacation time and hard-earned money to do this? Why is Trev doing this to us? But having said that, the minute we get done, we're always like, dude, I'm so glad we did that. I can't wait to go back and subject myself to this again. It always happens.
You're welcome.
I think it's worth noting that the trip was probably extra hard for you too because your backpack was so heavy.
Way to call Luis like that. I mean, it's just a podcast. Everyone's just calling him out. But
Yeah.
true.
Well,
True.
You can cut that out then.
No, that's I mean, that's an important thing to mention. So like I mentioned, this was Luis's trip and he's still and I don't mean to speak too much for you, Luis, but you're still working through the things that you actually need or really want. So like Kyle and I have talked I think we've probably talked about this on the podcast with numerous people, like what people bring on the trip on a hiking trip like this really speaks volumes about themselves. So like my kit is really light, except I bring probably usually double the amount of food I need. And I just do it every time because I like that safety net for myself that I always bring way too much food and I know I will never run out. And that makes me comfortable and I don't mind carrying that extra weight. Luis, he brought a chair and he really liked having that chair. It was comfortable and he could relax at the end of the day. We gave him a bunch of crap about it, but I think at least from what you had told me, you thought it was worth it. Okay, now you can come defend yourself, Luis.
We lost Luis.
We lost him.
Uh-oh.
Well,
that's
not
one
so
of the
much
things I'll say is that in terms of having spent so much time paddling up in the Northwoods, like in terms of food, I have a habit of I always bring at least an extra day's worth of food because there are those days where you're not getting on the water. And like with this trip, way in and out is you have to catch the ferry. It's totally possible that the lake could have whipped up and the ferry couldn't come get us. Like one of the cool things we had is the day we went out Monday morning, Lake Superior was dead calm, like to the point of being creepy, which was really cool. But yeah, that extra day of food, anytime when water is required to get back to the truck, you probably want to have that. You know, that's not really a luxury item. That's a safety item, kind of like a first aid kit.
No, for sure.
And the other thing that I didn't realize, having spent so much time up north, is that there's no bears on this island. So I didn't need the bear can. That would have been nice to not have that. But hindsight being 2020.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
Well, if we're going to use
We
this
have-
time to kind of pile on Luis about things that he brought, the chair was one thing, but bringing a mallet and an electric, pump for his sleeping pad, I think that might. In fact, I remember when he first turned that electric pump on, and we're out in the middle of the wilderness. You could hear everyone kind of shuffle, like, what is that sound? Did someone drag an electric pump all the way out in the wilderness?
Okay, Luis.
But in his defense, it was tiny.
That's true.
All right, so can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. In my defense, I do not believe that the chair nor the pump was my downfall. I believe it was probably the extra 5 to 10 pounds of food, unnecessary food that I brought along the trip with me, and the extreme lack of variety in food that I brought with me.
Well, yeah, that's another thing you just don't know. Like,
I definitely came in over prepared because I didn't know what to expect at all.
well, it's better to be over prepared than under prepared. So, like, I've been doing this for years, either with just me or with Alex, or now with our group that keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I actually had a thought about this to myself when I was packing for the trip. And like, yeah, Goska, you just mentioned a first aid kit. And I thought to myself when I was packing, it's like, oh, I don't have to bring a first aid kit. I 100% know Kyle will have one. So that's a benefit. That's a nice benefit of coming on this trip. Kyle's the Boy Scout, and I know he's going to have all these important things that we only need one of for the whole trip, for the whole group. Usually not every one of us is going to need to bring a first aid kit for this type of thing. So that was like a benefit that I thought of. And on that same vein, before we actually got on the ferry, then I was talking to Kyle. I'm like, Kyle, we should have a team meeting beforehand and make sure we aren't bringing a bunch of duplicates of stuff out on this trip. So the big thing I realized was so we had 10 people. We don't need to bring 10 stoves and 10 gas cans, or the little isobutane cans, because that's just dead weight that won't get used. And I think we trimmed it down. I think we brought 3 stoves, maybe 4 stoves for the 10 people, and it was plenty. And we weren't even close to running out of gas. So, and I know there were a couple other things that we decided that, we only need one of these. So that was a good benefit of having our big group. But if you were by yourself, yeah, you may have to bring more of those necessities. To be safe.
A good way to learn what you use is that I do a lot of week-long trips where I'm base camping, where I've got the truck. If I want to run into town, I can. I know how much food that I pack for those trips, and I look at what did I actually use and what am I bringing home. When I'm living out of the truck, yeah, okay, so I've got another milk crate of food that I didn't touch, no biggie. But I knew not to pack that heavy when I have to carry it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you have to go backpacking to learn this stuff. It's not that you really have to get off the grid and you have to be away from the truck. But pay attention to what your consumption is when you're car camping.
Yeah. Yeah, you can just, it's like anything, a little bit of experience. It doesn't have to be exactly what we did. It can be, like you said, car camping, or like an out and back during the day. It doesn't have to be an overnight type of thing. Just you figure out, the more you get out there and do things, the more experience you get, and you know what you're going to need, or know what you've used in the past, and you know what maybe you don't need to bring, but on the same thing, you can learn. It's like, okay, maybe I don't, like, I'll use the chair example. Like, you maybe didn't need it, but does it make your life better and make you enjoy the experience more? And that's going to vary from person to person. So, Luis, I think you agree. You would say, yeah, that chair was awesome. I loved sitting in that chair. Did you need it? Probably not. But did it make you have a more fun time, more enjoyable time? I'll go on a limb and say yes.
I would also like to add that that chair also made the latter half of the trip enjoyable for everyone else. Once my rear leg decided to crap out on me mid campfire in front of everybody as they watched me tumble down the slight incline we had, not once, not twice, but a total of 3 times.
It's true. And actually, on that note, I remember one of the early trips we took, Trev, talking with you and Alex, and you're like, everyone that goes on one of these trips has that one luxury item that maybe they don't need, but it's going to really improve their experience. So I know, like, Alex will bring that little Z-pad seat that he likes so much, and so I take a through hike with a ministry group every spring, and maybe it's a small coffee canister or whatever it may be. There's something. And so, yeah, as long as it's not too heavy and you enjoy it, it's going to make your experience better. For me, if I sleep well, I'm going to feel way better the next day. So I bring 2 really light pads. One's a blow up and one's a Z pad. And it's a little bit of overkill, but the extra Z pad adds no weight. It's kind of bulky, but it adds some bulk, but no weight. And it just makes me sleep better. So I always do it.
Yeah, like my quote unquote luxury item is all of my coffee stuff. So I could do this without having coffee. I could just have caffeine, like electrolyte stuff, but I enjoy coffee more than just dumping a electrolyte tab or whatever with caffeine in my water rolling. Maybe if I was in a hurry, I might do that. But I like the ritual of waking up, like slowly waking up, making my coffee while it's cooling down, while I can drink it. I can start putting away my stuff. It lets me wake up slowly in the morning instead of just waking up and like getting shot out of a cannon and going down the trail. I enjoy it way more. But okay. I think we should get back to more Isle Royale centric stuff. Kyle isn't here to keep me from going on tangents, so I'm going to have to do it myself. But okay. Yeah. So back to Isle Royale. So if y'all are like me, I had some like preconceived notions and expectations about Isle Royale. Let's talk about, did it kind of meet our expectations, exceed our expectations? Were we surprised by things? That kind of realm of questioning. Let's start with Gaska this time.
I was expecting more vistas from the top. I wasn't expecting it to be quite that overgrown at the top, but other than that, it was the Northwoods. It was the remote Northwoods because, like I said, I do Boundary Waters usually twice a year. I've done flying trips to Canada for fishing. I know the Northwoods, and yeah, it's the Northwoods in the middle of Lake frickin' Superior. It was cool. It was very cool. But yeah, the views from up top were, when we got them, they were amazing. Just sporadic.
All right, let's go with Brandy next.
All right. This is a tough one. So I had a great time and I really enjoyed it, but I agree, like the views were lacking. There was a couple really beautiful spots, but unfortunately they were on days 1 and 2, and we were just trying to like get to the next campsite, and so I feel like we didn't take them in. It was also raining on day 2, so like we didn't get to really like take in the views, and then day 3 and 4 we didn't really have any views, so I was kind of bummed that we just kind of missed out on views. There was actually a lot of bugs, but I was expecting bugs, so I did have the right bug gear to keep them off of me, but there was a lot of bugs.
On the subject of bugs, and this is probably just me being unprepared going in, when my expectation with all the vegetation was I was just like on high tick alert the whole time, and I didn't see one tick the whole time, and we were going through, well, either for me it was like chest high vegetation because I'm pretty tall, but other people are like almost up to your head, and I didn't see one the whole time. And I was talking to another one of the folks that went with us, our buddy Steve. He lives up near Minnesota, and he said, I mean, yeah, we have ticks, but it's not like the Midwest because it gets so cold in the winter. They actually have a bigger kill off, so they're around, they just aren't everywhere like you can get here in the Midwest. So I was pleasantly surprised. I was at the first day when we were walking through really overgrown stuff coming out of Macargo Cove. I was expecting, okay, I'm going to get to my tent and it's tick check time. We're going to make sure I'm going to have to check every inch of my body to make sure there's no ticks here. And I was pleasantly surprised that didn't see one, and I could have a much more relaxing time instead of being a tick hypochondriac and just constantly on alert and feeling phantom ticks all over my body, which was great.
Yes, not worrying about the ticks was very nice. But another thing that I loved about it was the day that we got to camp and we got to go swimming in the lake on the island inside the lake. It was really nice. I was expecting the water to be way too cold to get in, but the water was perfect and it was just a beautiful place to swim.
That was Lake Desor. That was our second night of camping. And yeah, like Brandy said, like that day it was pretty rainy. I think we had 2 or 3. Yeah, I think it was 2 different periods of fairly heavy rain where you just kind of had to hunker down and push through it. But yeah, we got to camp and we had sun and we were able to dry out all our stuff. We had a beautiful, beautiful view over this lake. And yeah, I think, did we all get in the water? If we didn't all get in the water, most of us did. And just, like I said, it was much nice. It was really, really nice because we were a bit grungy at that point. But yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous lake.
There were leeches in it.
Oh, wait. I didn't see any, and I was in there longer than anybody. I was probably in there half an hour, 45 minutes, and I didn't even get nipped. But yeah, I imagine they were probably in there somewhere because it is a lake up north. But luckily, we weren't attacked by the leeches. No. All right, Luis, you're up next.
See the irony in hey, let's get all of our gear hanging up to dry so we can go swimming.
Yeah.
And hurry up, get out of the water because it's going to rain. So we got to go put our drying stuff away.
That's true. All right, Luis, what'd you think of it?
I was extremely surprised by how peaceful it was out there. It was ridiculously peaceful to me, at least. Even with all the rain, I was glad that it didn't downpour on us. That would have really sucked. But it was very peaceful, and I think the sunset that we all got to share on Desor Lake was, I think that was my favorite moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you said like how peaceful it was, I think it was probably the second day when I was walking along, and I finally just like stopped for a second, said, "Wait, I can't hear any cars. I can't hear." Like the normal human activity sounds.
Yeah.
Like you just heard the wind or maybe the lake, waves crashing on the lake if you were in just the right spot, close enough to the lake. But yeah, I had to like make myself stop, slow down and listen and appreciate it. Because like in normal life, you don't get that often. Like, I mean, I don't live in a huge city, but there's still cars going by all the time or just like human people sounds. So it was really unique.
And it was really nice not to run into too many people or have overcrowded trails or campsites or even the main drop off and pickup area where the visiting center was. There were a lot of people there at the end, but it wasn't overcrowded or obnoxious by any means. Yeah, it was extremely beautiful.
Yeah, that's another important, I guess, fact. I don't know the exact statistics, but the vast majority of people that visit Isle Royale stay close, like within 5 or 10 miles of Wendigo Visitor Center or Rock Harbor Visitor Center. So we were in the middle of the island where, I mean, hiking, if we saw more than 25, 30 people other than our group the entire time, it was only by a couple. And that was over 4.5 days. So that tells you how few people actually go to the interior of the island. And that's by design. So you have to get a permit to go there, and I had to get permits for our group because we had the largest allowable group, which was 10. If you have more than 10, you have to split it into two groups with vastly different itineraries. They don't even let you stay in the same campground ever with your own group. Yeah, I think last for like how we felt about it, did it meet our expectations, is Doug.
Actually, before you go on with that,
yeah,
with the group campsites, we were running 6 tents?
Yes,
for the 10 of us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So they give us it's group campsites that are supposed to support a group of 10. They don't support 10 tents. 6.
That's an important fact.
Most of the sites we had, 6 tents was tight.
Yeah, I think we had the one we stayed at, Island Mine, the last one. We probably could have fit 1 to 2 more tents in it, but that was the biggest site we had by far.
Yeah, that was almost a KOA, but yeah.
That was really nice compared to the other ones for sure.
But
thank you. That's a very important point to make.
Yeah, it'll handle 10 if you're friendly.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll go here. So I'll admit, Trev, when we do these trips, whether it's with you or on our own, I'm like the research guy. Like I like to search on TikTok and see all the videos. So a lot of this, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding going in. A couple things that didn't kind of meet what I was expecting, though. One is there is some beauty out there. The overlook vistas we had on day 2 were gorgeous. The shoreline is gorgeous. Those campsites on the lake, especially Lake DeSoar, was gorgeous. I will say on the other side of it, though, for a national park, I'm used to kind of the main trails being really well laid out and easy to find. And so when we planned out that we were going to do, was it Greenstone Trail, like the main one through the middle, my expectation goes back to my experience, whether it be at Olympic or, Mount Rainier. And this trail was not that. It was really remote. And to be honest, if you're going to Isle Royale for the purpose of really experiencing that remoteness, then the trail fits right in because you feel remote just even hiking through some of the low-lying areas there because it's so overgrown. The other thing is there's some areas where you've got to go over marsh. It's really wet. And again, for a national park, I'm expecting at least a little bit of development there. And there were some areas where you could walk across on boards, but it really isn't a lot. Again, it kind of fits this theme of being remote. There's areas where it's kind of in disrepair or you've got to be really careful. We're not talking about bridges that are 3 feet wide. We're talking like a foot where you're on this, 2x8 and you're balancing, with water all around you. So that part hit me really soon, just that first day we're hiking in. And I'm kind of like, when's the good part of this trail start? And now kind of just what's the hiking that we had the whole time. But yeah, the other part, I was prepared for the remoteness because again, you get online and it says no cell service, no Wi-Fi, no support. Like that's why we want to know your group and where you're going to be at because we want to make sure you get to the end. But there is something about, being out there. Let's say we're on the edge of Lake DeSoar, or we had lunch that one time on Lake Hatchet, and it kind of hits you just how remote that area is. It kind of reminded me of an entirely different way with Death Valley. There's parts of Death Valley we were at that felt incredibly remote in their own way. It's desert. Remember, we drove this way out there in the middle of nowhere by this sand dune on the north side, and we camped out there, and it just felt like you were so detached from reality as you're surrounded by these mountains. I got that same feeling in a totally different way, though, at Isle Royale when you're out there and you've got no cell, no Wi-Fi. You've got your map, and that's kind of the only way you're navigating, and you're not seeing any people, and it's just kind of you in the sunset. So it's even more remote than I had expected going in, but it's a cool place. I'm glad we went. I'm not sure. I think if I ever went back, I'd want a kayak just to see it a little differently because I thought the shorelines were super beautiful. But definitely an experience. That's for sure.
Yeah, I do want to make a comment. So you were talking about how the trails were built. Sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent and I'm going to bore everybody with like government rules. But the vast majority of Isle Royale is designated as a national wilderness. And what that means, Alex, I'm sorry if I misquote this, but it basically means that any trails that are built cannot use mechanical means. So you can't have a chainsaw. It all has to be done with like hand tools. So that's why you don't have these like perfectly paved trails, because anything that is brought out there to make these bridges is hand carried in. So you don't have ATVs to bring it in. You're carrying all of your tools. So the amount of effort that it takes to have like I'll call it a very well maintained trail that's, I don't know, 4 feet wide, like you see in a lot of the other big national parks. It's just not worth it for that type of thing. It would take so much effort, so much people, so much money, and so much time to make a trail like that through a wilderness area like this. That's like you would hike 20, 30 miles to get to some of these points. And then you have to start building the trail or maintaining the trail when you get there. So that's why, I mean, they go through with like things to knock the vegetation back probably once a year. Maybe at the beginning of the season, they go through and take down some blowdowns, but it's very, very minimal just from the amount of time and money and people it takes. And yeah, so that's why.
Yeah,
Sorry to go
I
on
had
that
that.
tangent.
No, I remember actually I worked with Alex for a summer for the Forest Service in a wilderness area, so we had to hike in cross-cut saws and axes. You couldn't even use a wheelbarrow because that's mechanized, because by the definition of a machine it fits. So it makes sense. I guess just my expectation going in was, the main trail through the middle of the island, I'm sure that's going to be really nice and well maintained. And it wasn't. But hearing you explain that and thinking back to really what Isle Royale is, which is just, unchanged wilderness, the trail does fit that description. It really is wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like the whole like trail system up there totally reminded me of the B-Dub. It's wilderness area, and I know up there like they do, or at least I've been told they do get to like helicopter stuff in every so often, because Forest Service uses that as a quote training exercise of how do we transport stuff in the event of a wildfire. So hey, we can be dropping supplies, practicing dropping supplies to the firefighting guys, and supplies just could be the 2x8s you're going to build a bridge out of.
Yeah.
Fortunately in the B-Dub, you can transport a lot more by canoe as opposed to here where you're humping it all. But
yeah,
this was total standard like Northwoods Trail to me.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I guess I should go over like my expectations. I feel like I was pretty well prepared for what we were going to get. The one thing I was disappointed in, I didn't get to see a moose. Only one person in our group got to see a moose, and I think we saw in the visitor center at Wendigo that there's estimated 500 or 600 on the island, maybe a little more than that. I can't exactly remember, but it was in the hundreds. And Kyle's girlfriend, Erin, saw one, and she was the only one of us, our whole group, that saw a moose the whole time. We weren't really expecting to see the wolves because there's like 20 or 30 wolves total on the island, and they don't want anything to do with people. But we did get to see a fox that was prowling around our campsite the last night and looking for any food that people had left out. So that was, I guess, the coolest animal encounter that we had. Probably. I mean, we saw some loons and stuff like that. State bird of Minnesota. But yeah.
Yeah,
I was bummed. I would have loved to see a moose.
Yeah, if I can add to that,
Yeah.
speaking of expectations, it was I was not expecting the lack of wildlife, I think is the best way I can say it. Just watching, like Doug, I watched a lot of videos and whatnot and stuff like that about the island, and I was kind of expecting more to visibly see more wildlife, whether it just be like birds or little critters running around, or just like animals attracted to campsites for a snack or something that they can sneak away from people. But even some of the outhouses, there was that one outhouse that we went to, and it was almost like completely devoid of any spider webs or bugs, or it seemed like, which I found a little odd.
Yeah, I do remember thinking as we were hiking one day, I was like, I haven't walked through one spider web. I don't know if that was just because Doug and Brandy were leading the crew and knocking them all down, or what. But
I don't think so.
But yeah.
Brandy usually always leads us when we hike. I don't think you were running into many spider webs. If anything, so Brandy and I hike a lot, and she usually hikes in front. And so when she would go through the tall vegetative growth, I'd be, 6, 7, 8 feet behind her. And especially down in the low-lying areas, her walking through the plants would stir up the mosquitoes. So I would walk into the mosquitoes that had been stirred up by her. Now, up at the higher elevation, that wasn't a problem. We hardly saw mosquitoes up there. But down at the lower areas where it's more marshy or we had the thick overgrowth, and speak of wildlife, that's the wildlife we saw quite a bit of, especially at lower elevation.
Now that you say that, Trev, I'm going to say that I think this is just a Northwoods thing of like the lack of ticks is the lack of spider webs of.
Same.
Yeah, I'm kind of not used to seeing them up there anywhere. And then, we're hiking down south. Yeah,
they're everywhere. Every night they will set up their whole spider web across the whole trail because it's a nice open area that they can catch other bugs. So that was a nice reprieve.
One thing I do have to say though is we didn't hit any of the black flies. That was nice.
Yeah, that was by design. I picked a day or a time period where they shouldn't have been bad, and I didn't see a one, and I've been bit by them before, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So I think, Luis, you already hit on this about our favorite moment. And like Luis said, it was the sunset on Lake Desor. Are you going to stay with that answer, or do you have another one?
I think I'll stay with that answer.
Okay. Next, Doug, what was your favorite moment?
Yeah, twofold. So on day 2, the long mileage day, I got into camp and I was already soaked. We had gotten a short rainstorm right before we got into camp, and me and Brady and Luis were coming in, and we're kind of like, screw it, we're not going to get all the rain stuff out. We're already kind of wet and sweaty from the day, and so I got soaked and got into camp, and you guys had already hopped in the lake. So literally I just put my bag down and walked straight into the water in all of my clothes because they were already soaked and muddy. I'm like, what am I going to do? Get them more wet? But just being out there in the water after having hiked all day was pretty fantastic. And then when we got to the end, not that I'm necessarily looking forward to the end of it, but there was this nice kind of cabin lodge area there in Wendigo. And we got a drink, and they had these reclining wooden chairs there on a deck. And it was beautiful. It was sunny. The water was blue. The weather was perfect. And we all just kind of sat there and had a drink and just chatted. And that's a perfect place for that. A place to just relax for a minute, have a cold drink before you get on the boat to go over. I really enjoyed that part.
And you could watch everybody come in as they finish the hike. Everybody get cheers as you come in. What about you, Gaska?
I'm going to go with 2 of them. One of them was what I already described of Lake Superior just being so dead calm on the ride out to the island with being so creepy. That was cool to be on a big lake like that and it being so dead.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time paddling, canoe and kayak both. I'll salmon fish in my kayak on Lake Michigan, and I've been half mile offshore up on that thing on a good day, but I've never seen a big lake like that calm. That was just luck being there.
Mm-hmm.
But the couple of vista views we got of remembering you're on an island, staring at cool lakes, staring at the big lake. Like I said, the vista views, they were sparse. We didn't get a lot of them, but when we got them, they were quality. They were very quality, and just the other day, I sent some of mine off to the printers to replace some pictures I got hanging in my house.
Nice. All right, Brandy.
All right, so I actually have three. My first
Nice.
one, I grew up a competitive swimmer and I'm a swim coach, so I love swimming. So swimming in Lake Desor was awesome, especially after hiking so many miles, having sore feet. Like it was just so nice to get in the water and swim. The second one, I love games, and so we were all able to sit around the campfire and play games, and I thought that was real fun. Good quality time together. And then my third one, so this is my fourth trip that I've gone on that Trevor planned. And this was the first time other girls were there. And
Yeah.
I loved having other girls. There was four of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was four girls, and it was just awesome. Like just to have other girls there. I know you talk a lot about diversity in your podcast, and there's not a ton of girls that go on these backpacking type of hikes. And so it was just really a fun experience to get to do it with other ladies.
Yeah, and I was real excited that we finally, it just wasn't a dude's trip, and Brandy. So it was nice to have more than just guys there too.
Yes.
It was definitely appreciated.
Yes, I liked it. Hopefully they all want to come back again and do it again.
I don't think we scared them away, but maybe they just didn't want to tell me. So we'll find out next year. But and as far as my favorite things, it was probably that swimming in Lake Desor and the sunset. And my second one is something that none of you did. Me and my cousin Emily and Steve all hiked down to Siskoit Bay from our third day of hiking was like 5 miles or something. So we got to camp at like noon, 1 o'clock. So we had a lot of time to burn. So we decided, okay, we're going to go down to the lake on I guess that's the east side of the island. And so we hiked down there and we just sat on the beach for 45 minutes to an hour and just like stared at the lake, listened to the lake, sat in the breeze. And it was a gorgeous day, full sunny day. It was great. And I've been up around Lake Superior a lot, both from work and other random trips. And I'm just a big fan of Lake Superior. And yeah, those are my two. All right. Where do we want to go now? Let's go with, so if other people that are listening are thinking about going to Isle Royale, what are some tips and tricks that we haven't mentioned now, or just important stuff that they should know, or things to bring? I'll start this one. If you would like to get a permit to hike, you can go you fill out a form and you can send it in. I think it was January 2nd, day after New Year's Day. And that's how I ensured that I got the hike that we wanted, because I knew we were going to have a big group, and I knew if I waited a longer time, they just may not have room for all of us. So to ensure that we were able to go and get our permits, I put them in day one, and they called me like a week or two later, and we got it all set up. So we were good to go from a permit standpoint, like 4 to 5 months ahead of our trip. But yeah. So let's start with Doug this time. What are some important stuff that someone that's wanting to go to Isle Royale should do or bring, or something like that?
Yeah, so I think about how I packed, and I packed like I packed for any other trip we've taken a through hike. The one exception for this trip was a bug net for my face. And I had read online someone saying that, hey, sometimes the mosquitoes are bad and you should bring those. And we talked about it on our text chain. I didn't have to wear it a lot, but in the times when the mosquitoes were bad, the bug net was a must. So if you're going to go out there, it's probably, if you're just going to Wendigo for a day, it's probably unnecessary. But if you're going to do a through hike across Isle Royale, I would recommend that you bring either one of those jackets, like the bug jacket. I know Brandy had one that she wore, or at least a bug net for your face, because when they're bad, the only thing you want is just to get the bugs off of you. So obviously bug spray, and the bug spray did make a difference. Like, you should use it. but I would absolutely spend the $3 on Amazon and get you one of those really small and light bug nets for your face.
Yeah, they weigh nothing, so you might as well throw one in.
Yep.
All right, Brandy, what do you got?
I would agree with the bug net, but I don't know how helpful it was. But somebody brought Raid and cleaned out the pit toilets, and I didn't have any issues there. So I'm thankful that somebody did that.
Good.
I'm not sure who it was. Was it?
Was it you,
I think we had
Vasca?
two or
A
three
few of us brought. I think 3 of us brought cans of that Raid. But the very first night, that was me. I went in there full force.
Oh, nice.
Thanks, Luis.
Yes, thank you.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
Nice reference. All right, Gasca, what do you got?
Well, they already said the 2 things I was going to say, and yeah, it was just it's kind of standard Northwoods stuff. You will and like standard Northwoods stuff, it is the very heavy tanned water, which means that when you're filtering water, it's going to clog way more often than you think it should, and that's life.
Yeah, we actually junked Kyle's filter.
Yeah, it's a tea-stained water. It's clear, but it's dark.
Yeah. And so most of the time, Kyle has a very nice water filtration system that can filter a lot of water really fast. So he brings it, and us using it in like the 4 days on the island and maybe a day or 2 on other end, we junked his filter. He had to buy a new filter at the end. So we all reimbursed him a little bit so he could get a new filter because we all benefited from using his filtration system. But
yeah,
cool.
Like I've got a MSR pump style filter.
Yeah,
and
I do too.
when I go up there by myself, I have to brush that thing out a ton.
Yeah,
I'm always amazed to how few. Like I might get a gallon through it between every time I have to clean the dang filter.
Oh man.
Yeah.
All right, Luis, what do you got?
I think y'all hit pretty well on the main ones. I'm having trouble of thinking of something, but from my personal experience, I wish I would have brought a better variety of food.
Yeah. No, see, that's just you're learning. You're learning. Like my personal thing, I know I want really spicy food all the time when I'm hiking. It makes it fun. I'm not just eating oatmeal. Same, but okay. I just remembered one thing. Oh wait, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Same. I just remembered one thing also. I think it would, especially in a group our size, doing a flashback to Brandy bringing up the games. I think bringing bringing a nice small game setup to have entertainment for everybody, like that one night. That was very fun, and it was very resourceful. Of was it Brittany or Aaron that peeled the bark, made little strips out of the bark from the tree to use as paper for our game, and
Yep.
someone had brought like a small pencil.
Yep.
So it became very resourceful, but just some form of like maybe group entertainment.
Yeah, especially on days where you only have a little bit of hiking. There's a lot of time to burn.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Trev, one thing I'll add is given and maybe people have different views on this, but given the amount of vegetation, I'm really glad that I wore long pants and I wore like the breathable fabric long sleeve shirts that keep the bugs off of you. They're not too hot. You can pull your sleeves up, but that way, as you're walking through all the vegetation, it's not getting on your skin. It's on your pants. So I know it can be hot up there sometimes. Usually it's pretty temperate given how it's surrounded by Lake Superior. But I would plan, if I was going back to the same thing of wearing pants every day and wearing long sleeves, even if it's just a long sleeve, like breathable beach shirt.
Yeah. Sun hoodie for the win.
Agree with you.
Yes, sun hoodie.
Yeah, I wore my sun hoodie most of the time. There were a couple times I got a little too hot and I took it off, but for nothing else than just to keep the bugs off me. because like you could put the hood up, but I put my hat on over the actual hood part, so it like kept it close to my body. So there was only one spot right on my face and my hands where the bugs could get to me. Yeah, and one other thing that I remembered, and Gaska, it was your suggestion on this, that we actually used paper maps too. They were just nice to have. Like we probably would have been fine without them, but it was nice at the end of the day when we're sitting around after everybody eat, we could kind of all group up and go, okay, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. Hey, do we want to stop here for lunch? And it was just nice since you're not going to have cell service out there. And to be honest, it's safer to have a paper map with you in case your technology fails.
Agreed.
So,
That's why I had the pencils. I like to draw on my maps.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's inappropriate things, but I like to draw on them. And, that worked out real well, And one of the things I was kind of impressed by is that for as off the beaten trail as we were, and as many times I wish I had my machete with me to get through the trail, how well all the trail intersections were marked. It was beautiful.
They were.
Like we weren't like following blazes or nothing. Like everything was just so well marked with permanent markers and posts.
Yeah, like we've kind of
no need for blazes.
Yeah, we've kind of been ragging on the condition of the trail, but that's a very good point. So I don't, for at least in my personal opinion, there was no point where I wondered where the trail was really. Maybe up on the very top of the balds when there was no vegetation, every once in a while you would have to look around and go, oh, wait, okay, it's over there. But I was never to a point where I got to a place where I like really had to look and was confused about where I should be going. Because there was a track. You could see a track. It might have been a little overgrown, but you could see like where people had gone before you.
And in terms of luxury items we bring, one of my luxury items is after the night of the flying canoe, I now bring a weather radio on every trip.
Yeah, that was really nice too. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and we were able to get enough signal every campsite we were at, including on the low spots.
Goska, so that I don't care what Brandy said. I loved your radio.
What? I did not say anything about that radio.
I'm just kidding.
It was genius.
Everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was great.
I've got a small one that's about the size of a pack of smokes. And Kyle and I were out in the B-Dub one year, and a derecho came in, and I was holding up my tent so it didn't collapse on me, and I got to feel my canoe come flying 40-some, 50-some feet across the campsite and hit my arm.
Oof.
So after that, we're carrying a weather radio from now on. Thank you.
Smart.
The only problem with the weather radio is it would always say 20% chance of rain, and then it would rain. It's like, come on, we need to work on these percentages, man, because apparently 20% up there means we're going to get rained on every day.
That's just weatherman stuff, man. They always say 20% rain.
Weather-wise, we had really good weather for July.
Yeah.
I've been up north similar weeks, and I've had it be, upper 90s every day. We were in mid 80s and lower for the most part. So we got real lucky on temps.
Mm-hmm. And you could also get like days where it's cold and you're socked in the whole day too. So we had, it clouded up and rained some, but then it would clear up after. The rain never stuck around for a really long time. So we did get really lucky.
Yeah, it was spotty.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're slowly coming into an ending, but this is a real short question. Would you go back? Let's start with Gaska.
I'm happy I've done it once. I spent a lot of time up in the Northwoods. I would go somewhere else first. That would be either different Northwoods or somewhere completely and totally different. But again, I do 2 B-Dub trips a year, so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Luis, what about you?
I would 100% go back, and I'd definitely love to try a kayaking trip up there.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a guy on YouTube who did a strictly kayaking trip up in Isle Royale. And, he just kayaked around the islands, and most of his food came from fishing.
Okay, I could be talking to that trip.
Yeah. That I thought that was really cool, and I would love to attempt something like that as well, especially going back there.
Mm-hmm. All right, Brandy.
I had a great time. I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't say I'll never go back because I could go back. But there's a lot of other places I would like to go and explore. So it's not on my top 20 list, but I'm thankful that I did it.
All right, Doug.
Yeah, so Brain and I had a nice 12-hour drive home after this. So we had this exact conversation, and I agree. I'm glad I went. I'm glad I experienced it. But we've been to some places where I leave there and I'm like, I could go right back there tomorrow, like Lake Crescent in Washington, Grand Canyon, Angels Landing. I'd go back today in a heartbeat and do the exact same thing over again. I wouldn't put Isle Royale on that level. If I went back, I agree with Luis. I'd want to do something different, maybe a kayaking trip. Or I saw some guys too that were just hiking from lake to fish, like a fishing trip almost. They weren't covering a lot of ground, but I could be talked into that too, like Luis was mentioning. But I'm glad I can check it off the list as we keep checking off more and more national parks from the list.
Yes, if you wanted to do a fishing trip like that, we go to the B-Dub.
Yeah, because it's lake, right? Yeah. But yeah, and as for me,
it would involve a 4-hour ferry ride.
Oh yeah, that's true. The ferry it drug on after a while, especially when we were going out there, because you have to stop in Wendigo, and then you go to McCargo Cove, and McCargo Cove was, I think, 3 hours more than just getting to Wendigo, and Wendigo was like 2, so we were on the ferry for a long time. But yeah, back to the question of this, I would go back. I think the kayaking trip around the islands would be really fun. I also think if you went at the very end of their season, when the Deducious trees are started to turn colors, because there's a lot of those birches that'll turn yellow, that would be really pretty. The bugs would be pretty much non-existent, but you would maybe have to deal with some not great weather. I don't know if being on the lake at that time of year would be too great, but that time of year up there is really, really pretty. But okay. So since we have a lot of us, I'm sorry to listeners that really enjoy my favorite questions, but I think we will skip my favorite questions for this episode. We'll get you back on the next one. But other than that, well, I won't do the biggest outdoor mistake one. I will do the one. Is there anything that y'all think we should mention that we haven't mentioned yet? I think we've covered it fairly well, but I welcome any dissent.
The one thing I would just add is, and we've mentioned that we traveled in a pretty large group. This is the largest group that I've done one of these trips with. And I'm used to it because we've taken groups before, but I would have no problem traveling on my own, or like me and my wife obviously travel and do this together. But it was nice to have a large group. We, obviously, like you mentioned, Trev, we were able to not duplicate efforts. And we had people that hiked at different speeds, who had different things they wanted to do. We were able to spread out during the day if we wanted to, but we were all together in the evening. So I liked having a large group. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really different for me, and planning perspective too, because I had to think about stuff I normally don't think about with this group, because we were going to have a big group.
That was
anything else
for me coming in as kind of picking up the group dynamic.
Yeah,
we're basically running 3 trips at once, and we just kind of happen to meet up in the morning and happen to meet up in the evening.
Yeah,
that's kind of how we ran this. And because of how we dropped off the first day, we're basically beating feet to get to camp before storm, and we screwed that up by about 20 minutes. So hey, well, we're getting off the boat, and now we're trail running. But yeah, with this group, we really weren't traveling as a group of 10. We were traveling as 2 groups of 3 and a group of 4.
Yeah, and that was something. This was a failure on my part. So Gaska, this is the first of the of our trips that you'd really been on with. So you didn't know any of our group dynamic, anything like that. And it was, I'll take all the blame on it. I didn't explain to you that all of us have kind of just figured out that we hike at different paces, and the fast people go fast, the slower people go slow. And we all, like, if we plan to meet up at lunch, we meet up at lunch, but the groups we just let the groups kind of naturally form and disform as the day goes on. And I didn't explain that before we started. That's my bad. But after a day, I was like, oh yeah, I should have said something about that. And we figured it out and we talked about it. But that's my bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's, part of joining a new group is figuring out, the new group dynamic. And but yeah, like if we had tried to hang together like as a big group of 10, this would have not been a good trip for anybody.
It probably would have
been a lot
chaotic.
Yeah, there would have been. I mean, yeah, people just we would got on each other's nerves from some way or another, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had a great time, guys. Yeah, I mean, none of us are like big social media personalities, I think. But do you guys care to plug your social medias or any of your friends' social media stuff, or can we just roll on through?
I'll vote to roll on through.
Roll on through.
Okay, we'll just roll on through. Cool. So I will bring it home with all my podcast stuff. So if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is rate us 5 stars and write us a review. Most of those are on Apple Podcasts. And if you give us a 5-star review, I will read it on one of the future podcasts, as long as you don't say anything super vulgar. My personal Instagram is at Trevor Bowman, 2 L's, 2 N's. Kyle does not have an Instagram. Not that he controls. He has one that his girlfriend Erin and I control, called Kyle Doesn't Have Social Media. So you can follow him on Instagram. But yeah, as always, you got to wave to anybody that looks like a Kyle. That's a big thing we have here. If you want to send the podcast a note through email, you can do that at adventuringformeremortals@gmail.com. You can tell us we're doing a great job, we should change some stuff. Or if you have guests that you would like to suggest, I would love to hear some guest suggestions. And the Instagram for the podcast is at Mere Mortal Pod. We also have a Discord channel. If that's your thing, the invite link is in the show notes. And yeah, with that, thank you all for coming on. I really, really had fun talking. I had fun on the trip with y'all, and I'm ready for next year, of course. But until next month, we'll talk to y'all later.